Welcome to the Side Hustle Dad, the podcast for fathers who are creating financial freedom without sacrificing their families. I'm Brian Steele, and on this show, we're covering the mindset, strategies, and tactics of a profitable side hustle. Let's get to work. So I hope you enjoyed our first episode. I hope you were able to spend some time thinking about the why behind your side hustle. Now, before we go any further in the Side Hustle Dad, we have to address the elephant in the room. Because just because you've got this idea, you've got this why, you have this vision, if you do not have the support of your partner, this entire endeavor is built on sand and it could collapse at any moment. So today, what I want to cover is getting your spouse, getting your partner, getting your wife on board with the side hustle. So we've clearly mapped it out. You have a vision, you have a purpose behind it. But you have to go the step beyond so that you have a champion with you, somebody who is going to support you, somebody who is going to encourage you. Because if you're trying to push on your own, it's just, you're going to run into a wall at some point. It's just not going to be sustainable. So little story time for me. So my first real side hustle that had any sort of financial traction was my recording studio, right? So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my piano back over here. I did some music production just because it was my background as a musician. I said, hey, I've got the equipment. I enjoy this. And so I think that there's an opportunity here to help some people, provide a service that they need, and have some fun, have some creative output. And so as I've talked before, I really wanted to eliminate our debt. So that was something that my wife and we talked about. What's that look like? How's this going to function? Because I knew this is something that was going to take time, right? I'm not quitting my day job, right? This is something that is going to be in addition. It's going to require some extra effort. And so while there's certainly things that I sacrificed in the process, I was sacrificing, some sleep, right? I'm getting up early in the morning. But there were going to be some times where she was, my wife, Abby, she was going to be taking some additional brunt of me having this side hustle business. And so for her to be willing to do that, for her to be willing to engage in that process, she had to see what was possible. She had to see where it was going. And over the course of 7 years, what started out very, very small with a lot of intentional effort, was something that ended up bringing in $200,000 of revenue over a 7-year period. And wasn't all just recording music and stuff like that. We'll talk about all that stuff down the road. But certainly that was where it began. That was a chunk of it. But we ran into conflict lots of times when I didn't do a good job of communicating, hey, I've got this project that I'm working on. Here's where I've got to, have a Saturday. I've got somebody coming over to do some recording. And so there were always those little pockets of disappointment because your family wants to spend time with you, right? They don't want you to just fully disappear. And so I think what's really important early on in the process of creating a side hustle is getting that partner on board. I think pretty much anybody would agree with that. But lots of times, these ideas come with some resistance, right? You bring up this idea, I've got this business idea. And so that is why in episode 1, we focused solely on the why, right? Because that is absolutely the first thing that you're coming with. You're not saying, here's this business I want to have. It's, here's the goal I want to achieve, right? You're no longer saying, this is for me. I just want to have a business for business sake. There's a mission here. I want us to move forward financially. I want us to save money for our kids' college education. I want to pay off our debt. I want to have this creative endeavor we work together in. Whatever those whys are around the business, whatever that why is, you have that clarity, and so you can lead with that and communicate with that. Because here's what's going on. When you come to your spouse, you've got a day job. You've got 40 hours a week you're already putting in outside of the home, likely. And you come and you say, I've got this other business I want to start. The first instinct is to be protective. Your wife is not saying, your partner is not saying, I don't believe in you. I don't want you to succeed. She's protecting something else, right? She sees that starting a new business, financially risky, going to take a lot more time. So it's going to pull you away. Takes away some stability from the kids, right? There's ambiguity around what's going on. And so understand first that the resistance is not an indictment of you. It is not an indictment of your capability. It's hesitation, right? Because there's a fear of the unknown. We all have that. Humans have that, right? There's a fear. We always jump to worst case scenarios. And so understand first that any resistance you're going to feel is going to come from protection. So don't own that yourself. Don't take that on as she hates me. She just doesn't believe in me. Do not go there, because that's a very dangerous place to be in mentally, right? The strategy is we want to get our spouse on board as a support structure. Okay? That is the important thing. That's what we're going. So we're going to break down really these 3 universal objections that come up. So the first is a time scarcity, right? You're working a full-time day job, and that's not changing, right? It's called side hustle for a reason. It is happening on the side of your already dedicated employment efforts, right? You're already busy enough. When will I see you? When will the kids see you? So that's one objection that comes up. Pretty obvious, pretty common. The second is around financial safety. We can't afford to lose money or risk our savings on a new business. It feels like a gamble, right? Feels like we can't approach this. And, the statistics out there seem really terrifying around how many businesses fail. And to be fair, I tried things that didn't work, right? And that's okay. You're not necessarily always going to get it right. But if we approach things the right way, we don't have to gamble our family's future on a business, okay? And so we don't want to do that, right? So, but that's another objection that comes up. Financial safety. They're scared about what this does to the family financially, even though the whole reason may be to benefit the family long term for specific financial goals, right? Lots of people sink money into this big idea and it doesn't end up working out. That's not the type of business we want to create. And then finally, just maybe you've got a history, right, of just trying things. And so whatever is the new shiny object that you're chasing, ooh, what's that? Ooh, that's a new idea. Ooh, that seems really interesting, right? You're chasing all these possible ideas and you lack the persistence, the consistency, the accountability to be able to finish. Like, are there a bunch of house projects that remain unfinished? Like that flooring in the basement you were going to change out, is it still half finished? Are you lacking trim around any part of your home, right? So if there's been times where you've struggled to commit to finishing a project, then absolutely starting a side hustle business can feel like just going to be some other shiny thing that will get abandoned in a few months. Okay? So those are those objections that come up, and recognize that those objections are around protection. Okay? They want to take care, your wife, your partner wants to take care of the family just as much as you do. And so she's the sounding board. Okay? And then on top of that, we talk about the time. There is a cost to her as well. Okay? There's a cost to your partner. That is, if you take on a side hustle, then that means you don't have capacity to maybe do some other things. So that home hustle becomes a little more on her. Maybe she's having to put the kids to bed more often. Maybe it's harder to find that date night that you always used to have. Maybe she's having to do more of the cleaning, whatever it may be. So just understand there's a tension there. And so even though there's a lot of work you will be doing in your side hustle, there's an invisible work going on. There's an invisible task that has to be taken care of if you're not able to get it done. We're going to mitigate that as much as possible over the course of this, and we'll talk about that more on this podcast. But that is important to consider. And it's important to recognize before you start having this conversation, these are the things that are going to come up. So go in knowing that these are going to be the objections, and yours may be more specific than that, which makes sense. But those are going to be the most common things that are heard across the board. And you probably feel them yourself. Like, how can I do this? Right? You want to. Okay? So, first objection, the time scarcity. You're already busy enough. Okay? So understand the concern. You're not going to argue because it absolutely is a concern. You are busy. You have a job. This is going to be in addition to. You cannot change that. Maybe all the work is up front and then later on, it's more of a coast because you build something that works on its own. Maybe it's a service that for it to make money, you have to be in the business. Okay? You have to acknowledge this. You can't argue. You can't say, you won't notice the difference because that is a lie. But we have to shift the thinking around this as we're going to mitigate this. You're going to take things from yourself. You're going to be willing to sacrifice your own time. You're not going to sacrifice your family's time to the best of your ability. Okay? I coached my daughter's soccer team, right? Just YMCA, recreation, nothing serious. That was a commitment. I was not going to let the side business dictate that I couldn't do that anymore. I had to make sure that those things were still in place, that I was still making time for my family. So we'll talk about that on our next episode as far as looking for specific times and what we've got available. But understand first that yes, it takes effort. It does take time, but this is also a specific purpose. So conveying the why, and this is going to be a short-term sprint, right? This is not forever. You're not saying, and maybe things change and shift in the future for the goals and stuff, but the reason we gave it a why, the reason we gave the side hustle a mission is because it's something that can be completed. Okay? So there is always the option of saying, hey, we're gonna get this done, we're gonna make this happen, and then we don't have to have the side hustle anymore. It doesn't have to exist beyond that because we'll have achieved our goal. Objection number 2 is the financial risk. We can't afford to lose money, right? We're already barely able to make the bills paid with your day job, and now you want to start another business. Well, first of all, we talked about wanting the side hustle to be something that creates financial freedom. There's lots of resources around like the $100 startup. There's ways of bootstrapping your business. There's ways of using tools like Kickstarter, like if you've got a product that you're going to develop, right? So some things, require an investment of money. So the objective is to take a lean startup. Okay, you're going to find ways to creatively fund the business without you having to dip into retirement. Oh, that's the worst. Dipping into retirement, borrowing money. The whole idea is to create freedom, right? Debt and pulling from your own future is the antithesis of what we're aiming to achieve. So everything we're going to talk about on this podcast is specifically around trying to do this efficiently. Is it possibly slower? Yes. I mean, there would maybe be some percentage chance that if you threw a bunch of loans at it or borrowed a bunch of money, that you could ramp and scale faster. But that's not what we're trying to create, something that's sustainable, that's as low risk as possible. Okay? That's where we are going with this. So that's the first piece of communication around the financial risk. We're going to do this efficiently. But then you can agree on a stop loss number, right? There are businesses do cost some money, but you can say, hey, if it's going to cost more than X amount of dollars, or it's not financially bringing in profit within the first 6 months, we'll take a step back. Okay. Give a stop loss number, right? We're not going to continue chasing bad money with more bad money. Okay. If it's not working, it's not working. We don't need to keep pushing with a side hustle business that's not achieving the goal that it set out to achieve. All right. So that's the second objection, the financial risk. The final flavor of the month, shiny object syndrome. First, acknowledge where maybe you've failed at that in the past. If that's you, if you're feeling that, if you're going, oh, yeah, that's me. There's some stuff I haven't finished in the garage. It's kind of a mess out there. Then just own it. Yep. You have to acknowledge it. You have to accept that. But then ask for a trial period. Say, hey, if I can invest diligently without hurting the family for a 90-day trial period, if I'm doing it well, that allows me to earn the right to keep going. So you can have regular recurring conversations. Okay? So those are maybe a few strategies to handle specific objections. But let's talk about how you bring this up. How do you start this conversation? Because you're going to need to give space for your spouse, for your partner to respond. Okay? And those are the objections that will come up. But how do we start? How do we begin? And we begin with the end, right? We talked about the why last week, and this is why I focus so much on that at the beginning and why I wanted you to spend some time reflecting and writing that down, because this is what you are presenting. You're not saying, I want to have a business for business sake. You're saying, I am thinking about the best case future, an aspirational future for our family, for our kids, for our finances, for my emotional and creative sanity. But you bring it up and you say, I've been thinking about our family's future and our situation right now. And I need your help with something. I've been feeling creatively unfulfilled. I feel like we've got this debt that's been bothering me. I feel like I want to have something that I get to work on with our kids, with you. And what you're doing there is you're shifting the focus from my business, my thing that I want to do, to getting help and looking towards the future. This is where I want to head. Okay? Then you want to link this side hustle specifically to the challenges that you face. If she's hating the debt, talk about how you feel that same thing. You feel that, and you want to look at a side hustle as an opportunity to reduce that debt. If she's struggling with time with you and you think a business might be something you could work on together, you've got this idea, say, hey, I feel like we've been going two different directions and we just don't have those common things pulling us together. And I would like to have a side hustle that allows us to do that. I'd love to think about what that looks like and how we could work together on something. Maybe we bring the kids into it and we all work together and have some fun with it. If it's your creative endeavors, you're like, I just struggle with my stress at work and I would love to find a way to get some creative energy going again, just because I think it'd give me a lot more peace. If she's thinking about a vacation, right? I want to take us on bigger dream family vacations. I don't just want to drive to Disney World. I want to fly there in first class, right? You're starting to communicate the outcomes, not the how we're going to get there. That'll get talked about. That'll get covered. You'll go through that entire process. But if you want to get a partner on board, you have to cast the vision for the end result. You have to say, this is where I'm headed. You have to present that leadership. But at the same time, you also have to say, this is something I'm going to need your support with. You cannot do this alone. If you push on your own, it will create tension and friction. And if the family suffers, man, that's just what I don't want for any of you. Okay? So think about those items, bring that vision, and then provide a couple safety nets, right? Give some space to acknowledge that there's fears and challenges with starting a business. And so discuss those things. Say, hey, let's talk about how much I would be willing to invest in this before seeing that, it's going to work. Or maybe you come up with a startup cost, like, hey, I did some research. I got on the Chat GPT and was kind of working with some things like before we go into it, this is what I'm willing to do. I'm going to put in this time. I'm going to do a little research and I'm going to come up with what I think is a reasonable amount of money for us to invest, especially if you've got to develop a product or something that you're going to sell. If it's a service, honestly, many of those things can be bootstrapped. Okay. So, but at least come up with that number. Say, hey, I'm going to come up with a number. What can we agree that doesn't feel scary, but feels like gives us a chance to succeed? Give yourself a 90-day trial. Give yourself a window of time to prove that, hey, there's something that works and that you're going to come back together and say, okay, let's look at what's happening. What sort of feedback am I getting? And share those with her, with your spouse, with your partner. And then I think the final thing is make sure you give them some power to change the direction of the side hustle. She needs an emergency brake. If the fear is that it's going to pull you away and you're going to be isolated on your own and not spending time with your family, that's not what we wanted. This is the side hustle dad. It's in the end of every episode that I want you to build a side hustle, but I want you to be a dad. And if this is taking all of your time, it's no longer serving the purpose for which it was originally intended, right? We do not want to sacrifice our families. And so be willing to give that emergency brake. And if the family suffers, she's gonna pull it and say, hey, we gotta talk. And you have to be receptive to that. You cannot just push through. You cannot just say, I'm going to go and ignore the needs of others around me. Okay? Maybe the business will grow faster if you do that. That is not the goal. The goal is not to create the absolute fastest growing business. People do that. CEOs do that. And in many cases, their family suffers. We're going to go at a measurable pace with intention, with communication, so that we have something that we're excited about, that we're proud of, but we've got a family that's backing us the entire way. That's how we're going to approach this. So give that emergency brake to your partner, to your spouse. Now, for some of you dads, You may be a single father. It may be you by yourself, and you're trying to figure out how to do this. If that is you, you're going to have to evaluate where your kids are at, because they're going to be the ones who need the emergency brake, because they absolutely need their father in their life. It is so critical and so important for them. It doesn't mean that you can't do this, but you have to be really careful, because they may feel less agency in being able to say, hey, Dad, I feel like since you started this business, you're not around us anymore. So you're going to have to be very intentional with them to really read the room and understand whether or not you're going too far with things. So if that is a position you find yourself in, I would recommend a trusted friend, a trusted advisor or mentor being available so you can share the vision with them, share the why with them, and let that person have the ability to provide accountability, right? If you are spending too much time on it, if it's pulling you away, talk about it. You have to be honest. None of this works without community, though. So that's my specific word for those of you who are in that situation. And maybe it just means a side hustle is a not right now thing. And if you can't come together on a solution, I think you let it go. Because no business at all is ever going to be worth sacrificing your family for it. There's other things you can do with your time. So keep that in mind. So today, your homework's maybe going to be a little different. You're not going to go build a business case. You're not going to build a website. You're not going to buy a domain. You're not going to open a bank account. It's a 20-minute conversation, distraction-free, with your spouse. We've already spent the time. You've written down why you want to do this. You don't even necessarily have to know what the business is going to be yet. I don't think that's important for this conversation. But I think it's important to convey what it is you want to achieve with it. And so what I'm asking you to do after this episode, find a time, 20 minutes is all it should take, and go through this with your spouse. Do not come in guarded. Do not come in confrontational. Come in curious. Really be willing to listen to hear what the objections are. Maybe dig in a little deeper. Talk about why you feel the way you do, and be honest about that. I think that will have a lot of power within your relationship and bring a partner on board that is in your corner backing you. Final story from me. I was able to leave my day job last year and start working in my business full time. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. As I was getting to that point, thinking, I think I really have something that has legs that I can really build. And I was excited about that. And the vision changed. The why changed. My wife and I had talked about it, and we thought it was great. And so we're moving in that direction. We're focused on it. We're engaged in that process and getting closer. I had picked a day. I said, I'm going to leave my job by this date. A few months before, 5-6 months, maybe, something like that. Far enough away that, it felt in the distance, but it was getting closer. I had a few clients stop working with me. I was building on the side, building, and a couple clients just stopped. Came out of nowhere. I was surprised and I was disappointed. And Abby, she said, don't let this have you get cold feet. And I was blown away. In a situation where it would have been very easy for her to say, ooh, maybe we should delay. Maybe we should hold back. Maybe this is an indication we shouldn't keep going. Because we had been communicating, because we knew where we were heading, because she was in that process, she was a voice of confidence when I was doubting things a little bit myself. She said, keep going. She was saying, I believe in you, even when it was sometimes a little bit hard to hear that myself. And so that's my little story for you of how this can have a profound impact. Because if you do this right, if you do this well, you're going to have somebody who has your back, because having a side hustle is not going to go smoothly across the board. You're going to run into challenges. You're going to run into negative reviews, or you're going to run into a client who it doesn't go well with. It's going to happen. It happens to everybody. And having somebody in your corner to project confidence, to let you borrow some confidence, is incredibly powerful. And that's something I want for you. So have that conversation and lean into it. I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the show, there's 3 ways you can help us out. First, subscribe on whatever podcast app you're using. That makes sure you never miss another episode. Second, leave us a review so that other people know this is a show worth listening to. And finally, if you've already done those, tell a friend. So many people find their favorite podcast because somebody told them about it. Thanks again, and remember, build the side hustle, but be the dad.
This show is part of the ICT Podcast Network. For more information, visit ictpod.net.